All right, our speaker today is someone who has a story that I admire very much, a story of personal transformation that really touches and moves me. And she shares her transformed consciousness by volunteering in prison and by leading grief workshops. And she's somebody that I am so grateful we have as part of our community. And so she's going to talk to us about living in possibility. Amanda Sherlock. Go ahead, Amanda.
Thank you. Okay, let me put my screen up here. Great. So as I was preparing this talk, first of all, I was appreciative of the village that I have around me, and I also miss my Cat Stevens collaborators, Nancy and Joe, because it's very different doing it by myself. So I don't know about you, but one of the things that other than community, one of the reasons I log into or attend Unity is to find some helpful hints and some reminders about living a better life the following week. And so that's what I'm hoping to share with you today. So with possibility in mind, there were a lot of other possible titles that I had for today's talk, other than living in possibility. This whole thing started because I was talking to a friend and I said, you know, my life is the something better, as in this or something better is available for the highest good of all concerned. And that's essentially what I'm going to be talking about today, is that the possibility of being open to a higher good than what my will is demanding is really what it's all about. But it was too complicated of a title to do, so I scratched that. The other possible title Patience is the Friend of Possibility. And until earlier this week, that was my little Facebook saying under my picture. Now it says, I think I've been hacked. So patience is the friend of possibility will make a return at some point. The other possible title was Hell in the Hallway, as in when one door closes, another one opens, but it's hell in the hallway. And that was another possible title. And something more elegant than that is Between Trapezes, which is, you know, as you can imagine, you're going from one trapeze to another, and there's a certain level of danger and excitement, and there's also a certain level of urgency, but there's also the remembrance that there's a safety net. And then the other potential title that I looked at was Rejection Is Protection, which has to do with the fact that when I'm not getting or having or experiencing what I had hoped for, then there's some kind of protection. In other words, it's all for my highest good. So there you have it. That's also the sort of thumbprint of what I'm going to be talking about today. This is a quote that Brian sent over to me, which I think is perfectly in a line from Eckhart Tolle. Life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. How do you know this is the experience you need? Because this is the experience you're having at the moment. So really, I could stop talking right now, because this is really the essence of what I have lived and experienced. And it also substitutes from what I might have put, which was the Stones. You can't always get what you want, but you just might find you get what you need. But I don't want to be in a Unity rut about doing my talks about English rock singers. Okay, so there are two views, and this is courtesy of my beloved partner, David, who said, you know, possibility isn't always a positive possibility. It could be a negative possibility. And for me, the word possibility has always, I've almost had a Pavlovian response to it, because it's like possibility makes me sit up straight and go like, yes, there's something beyond what this brain can think of. And when I turn it over and when I let God be in charge of my life rather than my human limited thinking, you know, magic happens. So I'm not going to read these, you can see them, but the one that I do want to read is the wonderful Mark Twain one, which is, I've lived through some terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened. So I just wanted to give a shout out for there is a negative possibility, but really staying in that does not help me in the long run. It just allows me to wallow in self-pity and fear. So this idea of this or something better is available for the highest good of all concerned is what I consider to be a positive affirmational prayer. This is really my prayer. Whenever I set something in motion, I let it go and say this or something better for the highest good of all concerned. This is my current mind map of my home. And back in 1987 or 6 or something, I created one of these because I was living in LA and I wanted to leave LA. And the home that I had in mind was on that beautiful stretch of road on 126 between Magic Mountain and Ventura. And if you've driven along there, you'll know that they have a stretch of lovely eucalyptus trees, but they also have lots of orange orchards with these beautiful old farmhouses in them. And they're those typical like child's pictures farmhouses with a front door in the middle, a window on the left, a window on the right, and 3 windows up above upstairs. And that was my vision of where I wanted to live. I could just feel it. But in the end, I didn't go to that area because I ended up moving up to Palo Alto. So fast forward to 1994, when I had met my now ex-husband and we were house hunting, and we found this house that as soon as I walked into it, I just went, oh, I love this place. It just felt like home. And it was this beautiful ranch house. It was custom built in the 40s. It had it was sort of a combination of elegance and utilitarian. It had a beautiful large living room with this gorgeous original wool carpet. We had the original linoleum in this huge kitchen. A friend of mine needed a home for her grandmother's table that seated 8. It was square. There were 20 windows in the house, and the ones in the corners joined together, so you had this full view. There was a pantry that was bigger than my kitchen is, and there were trees everywhere. There was an avocado tree in the back. There was a beautiful Maya lemon tree. There was an apricot tree right outside. There was a fig tree in this island in the driveway. And every morning when I went into the kitchen to make my coffee, I'd look through the windows and just say, thank you, God, for this gorgeous home. So unbelievably, I had lived in it for about 5 years when I realized that it was a white farmhouse. It was a ranch, but it was a white farmhouse. And the single apricot tree outside the door was one of 30 acres of apricots across the road that there had been a farm, and there were still the apricot trees there. So I was living in a white farmhouse with round orange colored fruits as the surrounding. So that was just one of those amazing miracles that I found. That, of course, that was why I felt so at home. And that big kitchen, it was a farmhouse kitchen. You know, it was just such an amazing experience to be in it. The other thing that I have done is I have used vision boards, and this one is a very old one. The gaps on here are things where bits have fallen off over the years. I made this when I lived in the Bay Area, and you'll see one of the items on that list is, in fact, coastal living, because I was so pulled to living in the coast. I wanted it on there, and this is what pulled me here. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And one of the things that Brian and I were chatting about was possibly when we all get back together again, that we can get together and make these vision boards for ourselves. They are so incredibly helpful. And in terms of the magic and mystery of having these things that are on here draw me in. And this one isn't particularly about things, it's about experiences and my life. So what about when we're in the hallway or when we're between trapezes? That from my point of view and my experience is where the work comes in. This is where I'm asked to suit up, show up, and do my personal work to make sure that I am turning it over and trusting in the possibility of what God and the universe has to offer. So there are always a couple of choices. One is to take action, and the other is to be still. So, this is a church, so I'll bring in a Bible quote here. So when it comes to God helping others who help themselves, I'm thinking about Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, and he held his staff up and the Red Sea parted. Now, I have heard a rabbi say that a very interesting add-on to this story is that the Red Sea did not immediately part. It didn't part until the first person got up to their nostrils. So that person showed trust and faith that the Red Sea would actually part. The other thing is being still. Sometimes that's the option that is the most appropriate, being okay with what is. So when you think about Joseph, as in the coat of many colors, he was imprisoned in Egypt wrongly, and he sat out his time and ultimately was the second in command of Egypt and managed the whole non-famine situation. So for him, that was definitely for the highest good of all concerned, that he was patient and waited. For him, patience was the friend of possibility. The other thing that happens to me, and I'll talk about this in a minute when I get onto the rejection is protection conversation, is gratitude. Love what I have. Whenever I have a situation that doesn't please me, I look for the positive and what I do have rather than what I don't have. And it's amazing how quickly that just flips me. The other hallway question, which I have had on this piece of paper for a couple of years, is, what do I not yet know that if I did, things would be different? And I've had it over on my desk near the door in my office for a number of years. And every time I pass it, I ask that question. What do I not yet know that if I did, things would be different? And a few weeks ago, I got an answer to that question. And it really was an amazing pivot to my life. And I'm still unfolding and unpacking all of the ramifications of what I do now know. And the other one that I have found really helpful, certainly on a day-to-day basis, is I don't get what I want, I get who I'm being. So, everyone loves a lover. You remember the Truman Show, where Jim Carrey walks out and he waves and he says, good morning, good evening, and good night. And he's just happy and everybody's waving. And so sometimes I have days like that because that's who I am being. Other days, if I wake up with an ounce of grouch, I can have people cutting me off, people zooming through four-way stops, people being indifferent, or people in stores not being very helpful. And when that happens, I go, oh, who am I being? And if I can do that pivot, I'm back to the Truman, good morning, good evening, and good night way of thinking. But from my point of view, though, the hallway is where the work happens, where my work has certainly happened. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So roads not taken, these could be roads that I chose to not take, or roads that were taken away from me, or roads that just were impassable. So I'm just like the negative possibilities, I'm just doing a little nod to regret, the coulda, shoulda. I go there sometimes, and I really try to not spend much time in it because it's pointless. So rejection is protection. This was one of my watershed life-changing moments. So some of you know that I was in software sales for 20 years. And, when you're in sales, the reason salespeople get a little weird with you sometimes is they know that if they don't sell to you, they might get fired. So that's just a little insight into life in sales. So I had the dubious honor of having my boss fly from Atlanta to San Francisco airport to fire me. And it wasn't entirely a surprise, but it's still, at the time, it was still like a shock. So the reality about the rejection as protection was that I did not like the job. The product was good, but the people they were selling to were not in line with my values. My coworkers were not in line with my values. And it was the people that worked there were so bound in their own processes that I had to go and swim at lunchtime because I was so frustrated. And I remember one morning I felt like going swimming at 10 o'clock. So it was true protection to be rejected from that job. So as I was driving back home on the 101, I remember saying, okay, there's a lesson here. I've got to learn it. Otherwise, it's going to be really painful and really scary, because I had a Silicon Valley sized mortgage at the time. And so I decided that what I needed to do was to be in deep, deep gratitude for everything that I could think of. And on my way home, I stopped at the supermarket and somebody let me in ahead of them, not into the line to pay, but just into the supermarket. And I turned to him and I said, thank you. I'm practicing gratitude, and this is going on my gratitude journal for today, that you were kind enough to let me in ahead of you. Such a small thing. But when I looked at it from that granular point of view, my life changed. I also had a Red Sea moment, because at one point somebody offered me a job that was commission only. And, you know, commission only does not pay a mortgage. But I said, knowing that there was possibility, I said to them, well, let's keep talking. I had no idea how that would work. And this was, you know, a few months after I'd been fired. And within 2 weeks of me saying, let's keep talking, a friend on the Stanford campus said, hey, we're going to New Zealand for 6 months. Why don't you come and house sit? So I went and house sat for them and lived rent-free while I did this commission-only job. Now, turned out that job didn't work out for numerous reasons. So I was still able to be cared for by the universe by living in this gorgeous home on the Stanford campus. And ultimately, I was there for 10 months out of the 18 months that I wasn't working. So during that time, of not working, again, I was always mindful that there was a lesson here, that I could, as this next bullet point said, use everything for my advancement and for my learning. And the other one, how I relate to the issue is the issue. So it wasn't that I was getting fired, it was how I was relating to not having an income, trying to figure out how to pay a mortgage, being supportive for my mother, being open to the opportunity that the universe was providing me. So I created one of those mind maps that I showed earlier. This or something better is available to me now for the highest good of all concerned. And I read it every single night. And it had things on it like the leadership is conscious, aware, balanced, and ethical. My manager is organized, experienced, secure, and healthy. My colleagues are cooperative and supportive. You know, those sorts of things. And I can work anywhere. So remember the thing about coastal living? I ended up getting a job that provided 29 out of the 31 items that were on that list. And it was the best job I've ever had so far. And I was there for 6 years. And that was the job that allowed me to move down to the Central Coast, because I ended up shifting out of sales into something else where I could live anywhere. So it was just such a wonderful testament to the fact that this idea of, for the highest good of all concerned, this or something better, and the possibility is truly giving it over to God. Okay, let's see here. So one of the things I had, this is the magnet that I had on my fridge during that period of unemployment and fear. And I looked at it, whether I needed to get into the fridge or not. The fridge was sort of my altar. It's an altar anyway, but in this case, it really was an altar. And this place where you are right now, God circled on a map for you. And this is part of possibility. This is part of this or something better is available now for the highest good of all concerned. And so it's really been an amazing journey when I have opened up to possibility and opened up that God is always there, always here to have my back, no matter what's happening. So thank you all for listening. I hope this was helpful for your upcoming week.